Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here another time. We got him in another time. Daniel Naor is with us again. Woo-hoo! And back by popular demand, adding his wizardry, mastery, and brilliant nuggets to this week's episode of the Weekly Energy Boost. That. We are talking this week about how to measure the soul's progress. And that is a loaded comment and topic. It deserves attention simply because, and this is in my decades of teaching both individuals and classes, I wish I had $1 for every time someone said to me, I'm such a bad student. I'm such a bad student. Now, Daniel and I, as many of you know, we teach the wisdom of Kabbalah, which is an ancient spiritual wisdom. It's the oldest texts we have from the wisdom of Kabbalah are at least 4,000 years old. This is not new age. It's not self-help. These are ancient concepts, and part of our work as teachers, as we do every week on the Weekly Energy Boost, is to make these concepts practical and accessible and relevant. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
I tuned in.
For 2023 or whatever year we're in. And the mere fact that some of us are worried that we're doing it right, that we're doing it wrong, that we're never going to get it right, that it's not even worth trying. You know, we're about to, we just started the month of Gemini in the Kabbalistic calendar. We're about to start the month of June. We're hitting the midway mark where New Year's resolutions are so far back in the rearview mirror, you can't even make them out anymore. And for all of us who are on a spiritual journey, it is important now and again to check ourselves. I don't know that the word is progress because there isn't really a roadmap that can be duplicated for any two people. You can't say to somebody, when I was your age, I was here. What's wrong with you? In the spiritual realm, first of all, time doesn't exist. But at the same time, it's about process and not progress. And that's something that I think we can nail down today for our listeners, as well as for...
What do you mean by that? It's about process and progress.
As human beings, we're very goal-oriented, right?
Right.
You can look at the calendar as a product of that, right? Obviously, the calendar serves to measure time, but we also use the calendar to measure progress, right? How many months have I been at this job? Do I need a promotion? Do I need, a increase in pay? Is it time for me to move on, right? Is it time for me to move on is not a process question. It's a progress question. Mm-hmm. Have I done everything I can in the time that I've been here? Versus turning inside and feeling, am I aligned with this? What's working for me? What's not working for me? Mm-hmm. How can I, if I haven't given 100%, where can I increase the value that I'm adding or the way I'm adding value? Meaning, we like statistics and percentages and things that are multiples of 10.
Yeah.
Well,
you're saying is certain things are easier to measure, and when it comes to certainly like the spiritual progress, which we'll talk about today, and the soul's evolution, it's like, how do you measure those things? Right?
Well, that's what we're here to talk about.
Exactly.
So for me, I guess when I looked at the topic and I said, okay, well, how are we going to unpack this? The truth of the matter is, I think that that's the biggest or the guiding concept for the conversation is there isn't really a measurement tool for spiritual progress because it's not, spiritual growth is not related, it's not quantifiable. That's the better way to say it. You can't attach a number or a level or you can't be a black belt in Kabbalah.
And yet there is a pathway for each individual or guiding thoughts or questions to ask in which each individual can measure themselves.
Right. But there isn't here's the...
one size fit all.
Absolutely. Like, you start out on, even though, and to go back to using the karate analogy, you don't know how long it's going to take you to become a black belt. But there's somebody to tell you, now you're a yellow belt. Now you're an orange belt. Like there is somebody to measure your growth. In spirituality, no one else can measure your growth.
Right.
You can use other people as a feedback system, but even that can be flawed. So take it away. I feel like you want to say something.
So much. How did you know, Elisheva? How did you know? You
It's
always
like the
read me
microphone
so
in front
well.
of you, maybe. I don't know.
So one thing that came to my mind as you were talking is it reminded me of a beautiful teaching, and I think it's very important and relevant for this, from one of my favorite Kabbalists, the Esh Kodesh.
I knew it.
How did you?
I
You
knew
see?
it.
You just read me so
I know,
well,
I knew it.
Elisheva.
Go for it. Take it away, Daniel.
And I had different conversations about it with students at the Kabbalah Centre, and it stems from this idea that sometimes I see students of Kabbalah really being confused by certain classes that they take, or they listen to this podcast, right, and they get certain ideas about sharing, or certain ideas about certainty, and all these ideas, right? So the way we take the teaching is when we hear teachings, right, it's also not one size fit all. So in our mind, sometimes we think it's all or nothing, or it has to be a certain way, right? So let's give an example of sharing. So students might hear other examples of other people and how they share, and then they compare themselves to that and said, oh, I'm not doing it like that. Am I doing something wrong, right? Or I don't have that level of certainty, or my connection to the Creator is I don't talk to the Creator, I sit in quiet. Is that wrong? Like I get these questions all the time.
Right or wrong, black and white,
yes,
good or bad.
Or the many times as teachers we get asked a question, and what the student really want to hear is like, give me the formula, give me the answer. And my answer will always be the same. There is no formula. There's no one size fit all. I can give you guidelines. I can give you examples. I can even tell you what works for me. And this is related to the teachings of the Esh Kodesh. Like, in other words, he's saying you need to make it your own. He's saying the word is that you need to come up with your own rule book. So it's totally fine, and it's important, and it's part of the spiritual growth to learn, to educate ourselves, to study, to be engaged with the wisdom, to even have maybe a mentor, a teacher to guide us, to get inspiration, to get guidance, and maybe even have a community and peers, and to talk about the concepts and how they apply it. But at the end of the day, how successful am I going to be in the implementation, and therefore in my growth on this path, highly depends on how much am I able to personalize it for me. I need to, and these were the words of the Esh Kodesh, said, you need to come up with your own rule book, with your own guidebook, and make it work for you. And he says you need to use all kinds of planning and scheming, like really to come up with ways. You need to create your own system and tailor it for your personal growth. And I think this is so important. And of course, part of it is getting to know ourselves for that, and resisting the temptation of comparing ourselves to others, because what might work for one person might not work for you. I know that for my teacher, the Rav Berg, he used to wake up every night and study throughout midnight, maybe sleep 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours, and the Rav Berg would do that for years. Now, is there a spiritual benefit to it? Absolutely. The Kabbalists teach waking up at midnight to dawn is a very powerful time for spiritual meditation, study, spiritual texts, especially Kabbalistic text. And I do use that tool, but I know myself. If I would do that now every single day, I won't be able to function. So I could say, but my teacher does it. I should do the same if I want to advance spiritually. No, Trust me, I tried. I know myself now, and in my guidebook, I can do that maybe once a week, twice a week, 3 times. But if I want to be a functional person and give value to people who I meet with or teach, I know...
Or your family, for that matter.
Or my family, for that matter. My wife is like, you've been sleeping in late. So part of my guidebook, I basically, we need to create our own rules in this.
There is a part of me that's giggling while I listen to you, because one of the things that spoke to me about the wisdom of Kabbalah when I first started was that there are rules. Like we say that Kabbalah is the rules to the game of life. Kabbalah is the rules to the game of life, not in do this and do that, but rather in the same way the laws of gravity affect us, right? You can learn about gravity and say, doesn't apply to me. I don't believe in it. And jump off a bridge, and how much you believe in it is not going to influence gravity's impact on your choices. But what compelled me to go deeper in the wisdom of Kabbalah was the fact that it was so true. And I'll give you an example that brings both Daniel's point and mine together. We teach, and David isn't here this week, but he talks about it maybe in every other episode, so we have to bring it in, I guess, in his honor. We talk about restriction. Now, what is restriction? It's going against our nature. He often uses the way that he explains it, and I know it speaks to a lot of people. He says, not giving into the lack, right? You feel a lack and you don't give into it. You keep your eyes on the prize. You go for the long-term fulfillment instead of the instant gratification, giving into the easy urge. But what's interesting for me about that concept, and when I heard about it, I was like, I don't need this stuff. I restrict. My life is one long restriction.
I'm the embodiment
I am
restriction.
the embodiment. Why? Because my teacher used the example that when you want to scream at someone or you want to tell them what you think or how you feel. And when I started studying Kabbalah, I didn't talk at all. Nobody knew ever what I was thinking or what I was feeling. I was
so
like,
good at this.
Nobody home 24/7. You couldn't read me. I had a poker face, and it was probably not poker face. It was probably more like resting bitch face, but it was still, I was an actress. I had it down. You never knew what was wrong with me. And what I came to learn is that if your natural inclination is to shut down, then restriction for you is speaking up. Right. If your natural inclination is to rip the other person a new one, your restriction is to shut up. And those are two extremes. There's a whole spectrum in between, right? And that's the other thing that's difficult about wanting to know exactly how to do it, is you sit in a class and you learn about this concept and you're like, that's it. I'm a people pleaser. From now on, I'm just going to say no to everybody, right? The quick fix is to choose one response and copy paste. No.
And sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's necessary to go to the extreme in order then to find your balance.
True. But if you say no without thinking, right, the automated process just went the other direction.
Right.
There is no thought. It's a knee jerk.
Yeah.
The goal is for you to be able to recognize, and at the end of the day, it's not that hard. Daniel said you really just have to be honest with yourself. You have to know yourself. When you feel you're getting upset, hurt, your mind starts racing with the defense and the criticism and the judgment, you're reacting. That's where restriction is not keeping your mouth closed, because your mouth can be closed and your mind can be running. Restriction in that moment is the mind becomes quiet. Mm-hmm. And to your point, my side of your point is that one of the ways to measure your spiritual growth is if your reactiveness is changing. Not that you're not reactive, because if you're not reactive, it means you're numb or you're in denial or you're suppressing. If the things that you are reactive about are changing, you're growing.
That's an interesting perspective. But wouldn't you also say that certain things you don't get reactive to anymore? That
For sure.
Can also be an indicator.
But that's my point, that the things, if you would look at who I was 20 years ago, I'm still reactive. but just not to the things I was
Right.
last year or the year before, the year before that. That I think people come to study spirituality and they think that the goal is nothing is ever going to bother me anymore. And
then they get upset at themselves that, I can't believe it,
that
right?
you got upset.
Yes.
For sure. So this is, we're both putting the disclaimers, if you're on a spiritual journey and your goal is to never be bothered by anybody, you're setting yourself up to fail. Because there is no such thing. As long as we're on the planet, according to the wisdom of Kabbalah, there is transformational work to do. And that transformational work is of the reactive nature.
Unless you're a Buddhist monk, then you're good.
I have questions about that.
I don't know.
I don't have enough experience to speak to it, but I have a lot of questions. Because it really, the passion and the human experience that makes us who we are is both the gift and the garbage, right? If nothing ever bothered me, what am I doing here? Where is my growth? Where is my transformation? And when I say bothered, I don't mean just annoyed and irritated. There's so many different levels. What's so funny? Something happened yesterday. Actually, maybe you can tikkun heal this.
All right, let's work it, Elisheva, right here, right now.
So somebody said something to me, and I was really hurt. And then I was like, you know what? I'm bigger than this. Not my problem. Not my circus. Not my monkeys. Never mind. And my husband came to me and he gave me a hug, and he said, "You are loved."
Aww.
And I was like, hey, are you saying I think I'm unlovable? Like I had this whole, what are you saying? What does that mean?
You can ever get it right with your wife. You're loved. Are you saying I'm unlovable?
So I had this like, oh my God, like he saved me 20 years of therapy in that moment, because I realized that whatever I was reacting to that person said to me touched that I'm not loved wound. And it's so layered in, who cares? I had such a not my problem, that's her problem. Like the deflection was so hard it probably poked her in the eye. But he was in tune enough with me to realize that the reason I got like that, even though it was like literally 20 seconds, maybe not even 15 seconds, and then I was like, screw this.
That's the benefit of having a spiritual husband.
Yes, and that's not what today's episode is about, but...
Let's talk more about this, Elisheva. What do you feel
Therapy
about...
with Elisheva. Tikkun healing on Elisheva. No, but that's to my point, is that the distance, I got upset, and then I shook it off. That's progress, because there's a version of me that would sit and feel really, now I have the language for it, like damaged. I would feel like, wow, that was really, I thought we were close. It was one of those moments between two people where I was like, hey, I wouldn't say that to you. Why are you saying that? And then I was like, okay, you know what? If that's where it is, I'm okay with it too. And
I'll give you another example, maybe a little bit more out there, a little bit like zoomed out, big picture, but it's an example that comes to me. A lot in my work in Tikkun healing, I work with family dynamics and ancestral work. And so sometimes we don't see the progress in other people. And so it gives us, or we feel we have the right to judge them. And we're lacking compassion because we're not in tune, or we're not aware of their progress. So far we talked about our own progress. Now let's talk about the progress of the people around us and what it creates when we don't recognize it and don't acknowledge it, and what happens when we do, and how it helps in building up compassion. So a lot of times in the session, like childhood comes up, parents, and I must say I feel really privileged and blessed and honored to do this work, and being able to have souls that are trusting you and sharing their guts with you. And so a lot of times, like really tragedies, horrible stories come up, right? Like abuse and other things. And so it's always really to see, when you hear a story of a family dynamic, it's always easy to look at the story and make our judgment in our mind, right? Like, oh, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy, that's who is to blame, that's the victim, and that's the victimizer, right? What I train myself to do is to, whenever I hear in a story someone is
the bad guy, I get curious. And then in my mind, I'm asking myself, what must have happened to that individual to act out in that way? Because I always assume that everybody's doing the best they can with what was given to them, right? So let's give the example of verbal abuse in a certain family, right? Let's say it's the father, and as the recipient on the other end, right, as the child, is like, obviously it can leave scars. Obviously, nothing. By the way, it's justified. It's not to justify the action, but it helps to understand. Okay, so what happened to the dad? What happened to the father, right? And then sometimes you hear of stories where you hear and you realize that the dad had a very difficult destiny, right? Not just receive verbal abuse, but physical abuse, sexual abuse. And so if you realize, and now we're getting to the point in the context of progress, right? If you realize that what let's say the father received was physical abuse, and let's say, quote unquote, the only thing that was passed on was verbal abuse, relatively speaking to the dad and that circumstance, huge progress,
because he received more pain than he passed on. Now, does it justify the verbal abuse? Does it make it? No. But, I tuned into working with the individual. It helped. I see how much it helps them to realize that it's all relative. And sometimes when we're able to see the progress that other people, the people around us or family members made relatively to them, it helps us to look at it in a different way and receive it in a different way. That's what I had to say about this.
Wow. I really feel like this is another personal session for me, but that's sorry for our listeners that had to hear that. I'm sure it was okay.
But we can talk about other examples, right?
No, I think it's important because there is this perception that a lot of people have, and Rav Ashlag, the founder of the Kabbalah Centre, talks about it, writes about it. It's this idea that we regress spiritually every so often. You can be, and I'm sure it's happened to, if unless it's the first spiritual podcast you've ever heard, you're on a spiritual path and you're doing so well, right? You have been so proactive. You have been so kind and thoughtful and mindful, and you're healing wounds, and you're everything's great. And suddenly you're triggered and you feel like you lapse like to such an older version of yourself, you can't even believe you did it. Mm-hmm. So Rav Ashlag says that there's no such thing. In spirituality, there's no such thing as regression. You don't, on one hand, yes, we also say that spirituality is like a escalator moving down and you're trying to get to the next level up. So you've got to be moving in order for you to go continue progressing. But at the same time, if you are on a spiritual path and you feel like you've regressed, it's actually a moment in which you're being afforded the opportunity to elevate sparks of light, and I'll explain that in a second, to elevate sparks of light that you missed in the past. So the Kabbalists teach, and I'm not going to get into the whole explanation, but anytime you get angry, anytime you react negatively to something, and I used the example before of shutting down. Shutting down is just as negative as angry if that's your reactive nature. Getting angry outwardly, I mean. So, by the way, getting angry can feel really good sometimes. Many times, right? Gossiping feels good. Judging people feels good. It's all negative. So why does it feel good? It feels good because we're actually taking light, positive energy, and throwing it away. So we get to touch it, but it doesn't get to serve us. It doesn't get to nurture or nourish or sustain us. Those sparks that we throw away, essentially, when we are reactive, need to be elevated. We need to, it's almost like, cleaning up the beach. Like, if you clean up all those bottles, they can be used for making books and sweaters and all kinds of other things, but you have to pick them up. And every time we feel that spiritual regression on a spiritual path, I'm not talking about you were spiritual 20 years ago and then you decided it's not for you, and that may be a version of a regression. But if you are on a spiritual path, practice, and you feel you've gone backwards, It's really the universe giving you a chance to recycle those bottles, to clean up the beach, to pick up those sparks, and to restore them to a place, to a state where they can nourish you. So it's important in those moments that we don't, what I see, and I would love to hear what you have to say about this. It used to happen to me. Another issue. I don't think I've ever talked about this on this is so healing for me. When I was younger, as I mentioned before, I had trouble communicating. It was hard for me to express myself, but I cried at the drop of a hat all the time. Super crybaby. Not crybaby like bawling, but like I must have had tears in my eyes 15 times a day. That was just the way now I learn about crying. It's not a bad thing, but I felt it was a weakness. And when I came to study Kabbalah, I had a teacher who told me that I need to do everything I can to keep myself from crying. It's not good for me. So I took that to heart. And every time I would cry, meaning I would mess up, I cried even harder because I messed up. So I entered this like vacuum of tears because I blew it. And then I was upset at myself for blowing it. So I blew it even harder. And I see how people fall off the path and then just let it all go to, I don't know where it goes. Let it all go. Meaning they say, well, I've already been reactive or I've already been selfish. So I might as well do all the selfish things now, get it out of my system. And then starting Monday, I'll go back to being my spiritual self. And I see it. And, listen carefully, people. I see how students disappear. I don't know if you notice this. You can be working with somebody and then you don't hear from them for like a month, 2 months, 3 months. And I know from learning about it afterwards that most of the time it's because of this. It's because people perceive that they are not a good student, that they've fallen off the path, that they're unfixable, unlovable, damaged, and they have to hide.
Yeah, I got this a lot in the past too. Like, I maybe gave them some suggestions of things to do or things to study, and then, whatever happened in their life, understandable circumstances, and they didn't get to do that. So instead of like meeting and saying like, explaining what happened, they cancel the meeting. They don't want to talk, and like you said, they disappear out of this guilt and the shame. It's like, I'm not worthy of your time because I didn't do what you told me to do. It's like, I never said, like, where did that perception is coming from, right?
Take 2 of these and call me in the morning. Well, I didn't take 2 of them, so I'm not calling you in the morning.
Yeah.
No, but I think that goes back to the idea that spiritual growth is not linear.
100%.
And the reality is that we're not meant to do this work alone. And you're not here to do it for anyone else. Maybe that's one of the big messages, is that if you are changing or growing or you've undertaken a spiritual path for someone else, there will definitely be that sense of missing the mark or not progressing in the way that you would like because you're doing it for an external reason.
But this is such an important point, really. It really hits me very hard right now. It's so important to, when we're talking about the measurement, and then we all have good times and we have bad times, if we want to keep it in simple terms, right? Good days, bad days. Ups and downs. And the way that we judge ourselves for the downs, that is actually one of the real indicators. The lack of that judgment or how much of that judgment is an indicator itself and how much we're growing spiritually, right? If we have a down moment, a down day, or a down week, sometimes it's related to, and that's what we need to keep in mind, it's not that I'm regressing spiritually, it's just a different phase right now. And that phase, like we said, it's not linear. That phase might look different. Maybe the sparks of light that I needed to elevate in the week before, where I felt super excited and happy, Kabbalah also talks about, those are sparks of light that were on a higher level in the emanation, without going into details. They're on a higher level. So when you needed to elevate those sparks of light, you felt higher. But some of those sparks of light are down there in the mud. And sometimes the Creator puts you down there. The Creator forcing you to have a bad week. You don't even have a choice about that. You don't have a choice about it. The Creator is forcing you to go down, to feel a lack of energy, and it has nothing to do whatsoever with your spiritual progress, increase or decrease. It just means that's what's needed right now.
As you're talking, I can hear people saying, I haven't felt, what am I doing wrong that I feel this way?
Yeah, exactly. And the answer many times is
you're doing everything right, and that's why you feel that way.
A question that I like to ask with this, it's a really good question. Whenever you feel like you're asking yourself or your partner or your friend, what am I doing wrong? Ask yourself, what's right about this that I'm not getting? Because in that moment, there's something very right. But because of self-blame, guilt, and judgment, we're not able to tap into that. So think about it. Anywhere we are, where we are right now, is exactly where the Creator wants us to be. But you can say, but I've done so many wrong things and I didn't handle that test well. Here's another one, Elisheva.
It's like the top 10 things we hear from students. You didn't.
Definitely hits the top 10. I failed the test. I failed. Right? So sometimes we know we have a certain tikkun with something, right? Yeah. A certain repetitive pattern. I always lose it with my kids, or always this, or always that. I get to judge, or and here I know about this, and now I get tested again, and I can't believe this. I failed again. I'm such a loser. I'm such a this. I'm such that. And we need to, and this is actually something I heard from Michael Berg that I really like, we need to disassociate these two things. One is where I am right now. And where I am right now, physically, spiritually, in my spiritual progress, my spiritual process, is exactly, we need to have this certainty. It's exactly where the Creator wants me to be. Make no mistake, you are exactly where you need to be. How you've gotten there, that's a different story. That's a completely different story. Maybe there's things we need to look at and see how we can make it better, and we commit to it, absolutely. But don't ever question that you are exactly where you need to be, and you are growing, even if it doesn't feel like it. And sometimes it's life circumstance, right? Sometimes we hit a certain period in time where, let's say, we're relocating somewhere and everything is like up in the air, or we're getting a new job and we feel like unsettled, right? Or a certain family member unfortunately got sick and we need to take care of them now. So we feel like we're not in our element. We feel like, I'm not in the groove. I'm not in the zone. Sometimes it's just a phase of life circumstance where we need to realize, okay, the fact that I don't feel as connected, or I'm out of my spiritual routine. I used to wake up every day at 5:30 and have my tea and my exercise, and now I'm forced to take care of my mom, and I don't feel connected. This doesn't mean that you're not connected. Life circumstances changed. You are where the Creator wants you to be. Consciousness is so important in those times. When I usually get tested in these things in whatever shape and form, there's one consciousness that really helps me to ground me in that, and that is actually a very simple teaching or consciousness from the Baal Shem Tov, a great Kabbalist,
whose death anniversary is this week.
Oh, apropos.
You channeled that perfectly.
And he's saying, one of his basic and main teachings is that you are where your thoughts are. If you, in your mind, in your consciousness, think that in this very moment you're plugged in, you are with the light of the Creator, then that is your reality. You are with the light of the Creator. And sometimes when my mind is running and I feel this and I blame myself from the past and I haven't done this right, and why am I not as connected, or feeling this, or this is blocked, or wait a second, pause everything. I am where my thoughts are. And sometimes it hits me, and sometimes I smile to myself when because just for me it's a sign. Just the fact that I remember this teaching is a sign for me. Everything is good. I'm connected because I remembered that it's all about that thought, and it's really simple but very useful tool that I've been using.
So my version of what Daniel just said, I'm smiling because I just did it. So sometimes I have those moments where I fall into an old pattern. Everybody has them, or you get tempted. And to me, that's one of the signature qualities of the Omer that's finally ending this week, is that we get tempted into old patterns and old movies. It's like the universe is saying, this is your spiritual midterms. Let's see. I'm going to show you something that used to trigger you. Let's see if it triggers you again. And some people will look at that and say, oh, I failed. Right? Oh, I got reactive again. Mm-hmm. So it happened to me this week that something happened and I started to get reactive, and then I realized it's so like I'm better than this. You know, it was like really.
And then your husband came and said,
no, different one. I got reactive more than once this week. And true confessions of a Kabbalah teacher. And I was like, really? Like looking at the universe, like, you really think that I'm going to fall for that again? Like, this is where I'm going? And immediately it was like, I didn't remind myself that statement from the Baal Shem Tov, but it was like, I'm not going there. I am a compassionate, kind, loving human being, and that is not who I am anymore. And I walked away from it with such a clean break. You know, it was like I literally plucked myself out from the mud and put myself right back into the driver's seat, and the car kept moving. So I feel like, to your point, the first thing you said, that we all have to find our rule book. You have to find. One of the reasons we so strongly recommend having consistent consumption of spiritual consciousness is because you have to make your real rule book. You've got to create the patchwork quilt that's going to catch you when you find yourself falling or you lapse back.
Giving yourself the time to really check in with yourself. Like, I like to do it sometimes by the end of the week, Friday before the week. They're like really reflecting, right? Spending time without your phone, without distractions. And even if you just have 10 minutes, it's so valuable to sit and say, where am I standing right now? Reflecting on the week. And that's why it's good to do it week by week, right? Day by day, ideally, every night before you're going to sleep, you're doing this, but at least once a week to take those 10 minutes, 15 minutes and say, assess myself. And like you said earlier, Alicia, like being really truthful with myself without the judgment and without the labeling and without the guilt, like really just from a clean place as an observer and witness of that. And then, okay, this is where I am right now. This is where I like to be. Very, very important. Can I bring in another measurement that I think is important?
Last one before we close it out.
So sometimes it's the spiritual work is so simple that we miss on the simple things. And I love keeping things simple. So beside the many indicators, and we could talk a lot about many different kind of indicators of spiritual growth, measuring our desire, measuring our certainty, measuring our restriction, measuring our sharing, right? But each one is so specific and, can be elaborating a whole episode on each one. Another one that I feel sometimes we fail to acknowledge is joy. And joy, I mean, not in terms of measuring in life circumstance, because we all have days and weeks and moments where things happen that make us unhappy, and that's, we're human beings. But joy in terms of the overall, right? In the measurement, more in a state of like, okay, I've been doing the spiritual work, I've been on a spiritual path for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. In that perspective, from year in, year out, is my joy, generally speaking, my what's called the baseline, is my baseline of joy growing, right? Because for me, this is like, ultimately, the spiritual work is for us to be more connected to our soul, which is a state of joy, of bliss, of happiness, right? And I don't know. This is something that I've been using. I'm asking myself. I in my yearly review usually is also that element. Am I more joyful in general? Of course, the year had its ups and downs, but overall, is my baseline of joy higher than it was the year before?
I think that those downs are actually where you see the progress. That you handle challenges not in a denial way, but in, things are hard, but I'm still able to be there for other people. Mm-hmm. I still have certainty. I'm still, your baseline is higher, so you experience it differently.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah. That's beautiful. I actually wanted to end this week's episode, giving a few minutes to the powerful cosmic window that's taking place this week. It's Thursday night, right? Thursday night begins the cosmic window of Shavuot. And I was trying to think of how I can succinctly explain the convergence of these different energies. And I actually found something written by Karen Berg that I'm going to read as clearly as I possibly can, so that everybody gets the beautiful, I think Karen calls it the, well, I'll let Karen say it. Okay. Everything seems to be attracted to the light. Ships for centuries use the starlight and moonlight as their guiding compass. All creatures, great and small, rise by the sun each day. The sun and the light are one of life's necessities. The sun and its light are one of life's necessities. The light provides vital nutrients and energy. Without it, human and plant life and all life could not exist. We are bound and interconnected to physical light as well as spiritual light. We cannot live long without sunlight, food, or water, but we cannot live for even a second without the energy and light of the Creator. Spiritual light sustains us to our very core. This week, we move toward the spiritual light that not only sustains us, but fuels us, heals us, and even blesses us. The new moon of Gemini enters this week, and we zoom forward toward the Creator, amplifying our spiritual journey and providing blessings in our essential light. We finish the final week of the Omer, a period of spiritual elevation, and we move toward the greatest and brightest light of the entire year. Our portion for the next stage in our journey is Naso. Naso, which is the weekly portion from the Torah and the Zohar, is unique as it is also read on the holiday of Hanukkah. This is an indication already that this week we are able to connect to an extraordinary reservoir of spiritual light. The portion of Naso is also attached to the holiday of Shavuot, as it is read always before or after it. This year we read Naso we read Naso after Shavuot. Shavuot is the day on which the Torah was given to the world. The Torah, when given, revealed so much of the Creator's light and essence that it was if the sun itself came to the earth. All forms of darkness were removed, including the removal of any sickness and even the removal of death itself. Shavuot and our portion of Naso both contain the totality of light, and with it, the power of immortality. Another thing that's unique about this year is that we have the new moon of Gemini, which was yesterday, by the way. The new moon of Gemini offers the influence of our new ruling planet of Mercury, which is, by no coincidence, the closest planet to the sun. This is an incredibly powerful week ahead when we have the opening to ask the Creator for the light to help us remove our obstacles, help solve our challenges, purify us, and radiate us with blessings. Naso revisits the tabernacle's inauguration, in which all the tribal chieftains gave individual sacrifices and gifts. It is via these sacrifices and gifts that we are able to remove the self-imposed blockages that have shut out our light prior. With the gift of Naso, we now generate, untethered and unrestricted, the entire life force of the Creator, bringing us another step toward the removal of pain, suffering, and even death itself. If there is ever a time of the year that the light is turned on, it is this week. Almost done. It's so beautiful, I can't stop. We are all searching for something. We search for comfort and pleasure. We search for answers. Some search for the Creator, while others devote their lives to searching for their purpose in this world. We are all on a search for more. Kabbalah, with its tools of light, offers to us more than we can hunger. Every being on earth craves the light, physically and spiritually, even if we may not realize it. The light is what makes us feel at peace, content, fearless, and joyful. It is through acts of love, sharing, and giving that we are able to draw more of this essential light into our lives, along with the blessings that accompany it. Our life's journey is to take the necessary actions to turn on the light. This light is the very secret behind our success and fulfillment. This week, the cosmos turns the light on for us. We're given the light of the new moon of Gemini, the portion of Naso, Shavuot, and even Hanukkah, a powerhouse week of positive energy that assists us in leaving behind the hardships of the Omer and welcomes a new time period where the light dominates. This week, we not only read the inauguration of the tabernacle, which drew down vast amounts of spiritual light to our world, but the inauguration of a 4-month period of positive energy. The light is coming, and we zoom toward this beneficial and merciful energy of love. This week in your meditations, go to the beautiful rising sun. If you are able to see a sunrise, it is not something you will easily forget. The moment of sunrise is perhaps the most positive moment of the entire day. Take yourself to the early morning and see the dark horizon slowly illuminate. Little by little, the sunlight increases. You can feel the warmth begin to build on your face. The birds sing, the animals emerge from their dwellings, but most importantly, you feel something stir within you. The light is coming, and with it comes a new day, new hope, new opportunities, and new blessings. You are inspired to be like the light, and your heart opens as wide as the sky to love. It inspires you, renews you, and restores you. It is the light of the Creator that removes the darkness in our lives. The time has come to welcome this positive force into our lives and into the world. The time has come to move toward the light. Before we do sign off, I just love those meditations. We still have, for one more week, people are able to sign up for Tikkun healing, whether single session or packages, with a 25% listener discount.
That's right.
Anything you want to drop in about that?
Take the opportunity. If you have thought about going deeper and exploring your Tikkun and reveal hidden dynamics that you haven't seen, if you have found yourself repeating the same patterns over and over again. You shared with us
the ancestral,
right.
The father-child dynamic there. That's a big, I think a lot of us are struggling with healing those things that we don't even know are there.
Yeah.
That's one way to work on it.
There's so many ways in which we are limited by what we're carrying for our greater family system. Sometimes it blocks us in moving forward in life with our passions and being prosperous. Sometimes it's blocking us in our relationships with our spouse because there are hidden loyalties that we are tied to our parents, to our ancestors, that we're carrying something, a certain baggage, sometimes a guilt, sometimes a way that we are trying to, sort of like my ancestors lived with a certain level of sacrifice and they needed to hard work. So I take that upon myself in a need to belong in a subconscious way in order to help them in a certain way. And so there's so many ways, and I see it every day, in which we are limiting our blessings because of these hidden loyalties that we have to our family members and systems and ancestors. And so many ways we're limiting our blessing just because of a belief that we acquired down the way. And unconsciously, and we haven't realized it. And so all what we do in these sessions really is just asking questions, digging deeper, and we're guiding you towards your own answer, towards your own solution. Whether you take that solution and whether you decide to do it differently, that will still be up to you. But the biggest part is to uncover it. And of course, we get a lot of tools and always part of the sessions is a visualization or meditation to not just understand it, because that's one level. Okay, I get now what's blocking me, but what do I do with it? We always make sure in these sessions that we incorporate a deeper work, because to resolve these unconscious ties and these limiting beliefs, you cannot operate just with the same mind that created it. You need to go to a deeper level. We're using certain visualizations, meditations, to tap into our subconscious, to tap into our soul, so that we can really walk out with an experience that will help us to make better choices.
What's different about this time that we're offering the listener discount is that now you can have Tikkun healing done in Spanish, Russian, Hebrew,
German.
I mean, it's no matter where there should be a language in those 5 that speaks to you. And in different countries, we have teachers in different countries that are able to do it now. So it just really opens up a lot of doors for opportunities for growth and transformation and healing things you don't even know you are carrying.
And the opportunities now are also for couples and for families. There are options
to
for
do that work.
too.
And they can read about that on the link that we have on weeklyenergyboost.com with the coupon code, so you can visit the homepage there and get all the information you need. Weekly Energy Boost is also available on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find even more goodies at weeklyenergyboost.com. You can click the donate button there and support our podcast. And please continue to like, rate, review, and most importantly, share this episode. We are where we are because of you, our listeners, and the light continues to grow. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us again.
Pleasure and a delight.
We'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.